Giraru Marang. My name is Bray, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just want to acknowledge that I am recording this today on the ancient, sacred, and unceded lands of the Wiradjuri people of the East Kulin Nation. And I also want to acknowledge that you're seeing this on the ancient, sacred, and unceded lands of the Darug people. And I want to pay my respect to the elders, the ancestors, and the community of the Darug, and also of all First Nations people who live in Western Sydney. In particular, a big inFirma respect to Uncle Wes and Uncle Greg. Thank you so much for the welcome to country and the smoking ceremony that happened at the beginning of the exhibition. My deepest apologies that I couldn't be there to be with you all for that opening. I would have loved to, but thank you from afar for that beautiful blessing that you gave us. Big shout out to my two sisters, Amala, Groom. Amala and I are very dear friends, and we've been speaking for a long time about collaborating, and I'm gutted to not be there with you tonight, sis. Talk up a storm, and we'll catch up soon. And a big shout out to Taree, who I know really well as a fellow blackfellow dancer. And thank you to Blacktown for having me and my work in this exhibition. It's been a long time coming. Hey, Paul. We had the small matter of a pandemic get in the way, but we got there in the end. And I'm super proud to have my work, Giraru Galing Ganhagirri, being exhibited at Blacktown on Darug country. And like I say, I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you all. Giraru Galing Ganhagirri is Wiradjuri. I'm Wiradjuri. And so a big shout out to my own elders and ancestors. I'm a Riley, so that's the biggest mob of us from up around Werris Creek, Tamworth area, from when northern Wiradjuri. My father's Christopher Kirkbright, inFirma to dad. He has always been a really important person in the political scene of New South Wales, and especially in the land rights movement back in the 80s and 90s. He was the first registrar of Aboriginal lands, and was also instrumental in the reconstruction of our language. So that's my background. I now live down here in Naarm. It is a rare, beautiful day in Naarm, in Melbourne. And Paul asked me to speak a little bit about the work. So Giraru Galing Ganhagirri is Wiradjuri, and it means the wind will bring the rain. I love alliteration, so I was really attracted to this phrase. And for me, it speaks to the implacable forces of nature, these kind of cycles of nature that have been going on for eternity, since the dream time, and they will continue on way past our lifetimes. Excuse me. And during the pandemic, when everything was feeling so catastrophic, and with, climate change looming and the rise of the global right and everything feeling very apocalyptic, I have found myself kind of meditating on the timing of country, how for country millions of years is nothing. How the kind of time scale of country and of those cycles of nature and of rain and storms and erosion, how they're just enormous. And I feel like as blackfellas, we have, as the best as humans can, we have the closest understanding of time of that kind of scale. We have the dreaming stories, which are stories that kind of try to encapsulate the eternity, the massiveness of time. And once I started to, it's actually impossible really to get our small human brains, especially in the modern world where everything's divided down into the microfraction. But if I meditate on that, I can kind of stretch my sense of time a little bit. And when I do that, I find great succor, great calmness, great compassion in knowing that the problems that we're facing, as dire as they are and as in need of our attention as they are, they are small when compared to the timing of our ancestors and of our country. So Giraru Galing Ganhagirri is really a work that tries to meditate on that and invites the viewer to slow down, to calm down, to watch, and to have a think about country and how long it's been there and how long it will be there, and especially for those of us who live in the diaspora. You know, I'm Wiradjuri, so our ancestral country is that big kind of central chunk of New South Wales, but I live down here in Melbourne. And so I find great comfort in meditating on my country. And one of the ways I do that is if on the weather map I see that a storm has come down from central New South Wales, passed over the Murray and come down that way, I'll often go and stand out in that storm and indulge in the knowledge that that water that's falling over my skin has come from my country. And it's a way of connecting when I can't get up there, and I can't see my elders and I can't see my friends and my family. And so Giraru Galing Ganhagirri is a kind of a meditation on our connection to country and how we carry that memory of it. My name is Bray. I'm a choreographer by trade. This is actually my first video work, and I've really enjoyed this exploration of this form. But my work really always starts with the body and centers the body, and I make kind of performances that are immersive and participatory, that are a nod to our ancient ceremonial practices. This very strange idea that the audience comes in and sits over here in the darkness and watches the performers do everything up there on a stage. That's a very strange colonial import, I think. When I look at the theatre that is indigenous to this place, I witness corroboree ceremony, where everyone is involved, everyone participates. Even witnessing is a powerful form of participation. So I make works that invite the audience to come in, to play, to have dialogue, to cooperate, to make together, and through that process to tackle the tough things we're facing in 21st century Australia. And so Giraru Galing Ganhagirri is a video work where I've tried to kind of do that in a way. I've tried to think about the experience of the viewer as they come and lean into this work. I made the work with some key collaborators. James Wright is a local Melbourne-based artist, filmmaker, videographer, and he was a real key collaborator, and we've been working on this work together. He shot and edited the work with me. And the score that you can hear has been composed by Daniel Nixon, who's a composer I've worked with on a number of my projects. So the three of us went up on country around Wagga Wagga in the Riverina. Wagga Wagga means the place where people would come to dance. It was an ancient ceremonial site. So it's a place that has called to me over the last few years, and I've been developing some really rich relationships with the elders and the community there. Even though I don't have any specific kinship ties, they've really invited me in and made me feel a part of that community and shared their important places and their stories with me. So this felt like the really natural place to shoot the work. It was also after the flooding, so the Wiradjuri River, which is supposed to flood, had flooded, and everything was very green and lush, and it was just so beautiful to be taken out there. The Elders Council there nominated Uncle James Ingram as the elder to escort us, and he took us out to a series of locations that were important for various reasons. and I thought I'd just kind of jot through some of those locations that you can see in the work. One of them is the Murrumbidgee River itself. The Murrumbidgee River, or Murrumbidgee in Wiradjuri, is is one of the very important rivers that runs through the Wiradjuri country. We call ourselves the people of the many rivers, and the Murrumbidgee is definitely one of them. It's a lifeblood. It feeds us. All the big river red gums that run along the banks are important. We carve our canoes from them, we make our spears from them. The Murrumbidgee is central to not just the economic life of the community around there, but also the ceremonial life. So capturing the Murrumbidgee on film and the trees, the wind in the trees. We filmed down near the Dancing Circle, which is a place where corroboree has been brought back over the last few years. And so that site is a really important one. Uncle James also took us out more towards his country, which is around Narandra and Leeton. And he took us to a really beautiful place called Miranda. He took us to a billabong there that had flooded, and you can see the most enormous ring tree in the background behind me dancing. It's the one where I'm in the water. And you can see the ring tree behind us. Ring trees are these trees where our ancestors would take two saplings and would tie them together. And so as they grew, they would grow literally to make a ring. And this one out at Miranda, you can see, is a kind of a diamond shape, which is really unique. It's also, you can't quite get a perspective from the video, but it's also enormous. I could stand inside that diamond, which means it's hundreds and hundreds of years old, that tree. The ring trees were boundary markers that would mark the demarcation between clan territories. And so if you were traveling into someone else's clan territory, when you saw the ring tree, you would stop, you would light a fire, and you would wait for someone to come, and you would share who you were and tell your business, and then they would invite you to come into the country. And this is kind of ring trees and scar trees, so modified trees that have been used for burial sites or to carve coolamons or shields. They're kind of Uncle James's specialty. And as he took me through country, he would go, oh, look there, look there, look there. And once you looked around, they're everywhere. You can see, you don't see them at first, but once someone points them out to you, you realize that the presence of Wiradjuri culture, people and ancestors is everywhere. He took us to a scar tree that had been cut down, sadly, by a development. And the community in Wagga, it's a really beautiful big scar tree, and they took it up to the top of this hill. So it's no longer living because it was cut down, but they took it up there, they performed ceremony and did a smoking, and kind of, it's a very big, beautiful one. So you can see that with the moon in the background. That was one of the locations. We also filmed up on a hill called Pomingalana. Pomingalana and Gobba Goblin is a kind of Riverina Romeo and Juliet story. It's a women's story. The aunties, particularly Auntie Cheryl Penrith and Auntie Mary Atkinson, were really generous in sharing that story with us. And we went up to the Pomingalana Hill, which is the men's site that overlooks the women's site. And we shot some really beautiful footage with flowers that were up there. We also went up towards Tumut. Tumut is a really important place, which is the site of the story around the birth of the Murrumbidgee River. And we went up to Highfields Farm. A couple of white fellas are doing an amazing job there, bringing back the native forest and some endangered species up there. And in particular, we went and into the native grasslands there. And it was dawn, and it was freezing cold. It was up in the mountains, but it was really beautiful. And we also kind of found as we went along these places, like the railway tracks at Narandra. We thought there was something really interesting about these kind of abandoned railway tracks, these kind of almost like scars that ran through the country. So we filmed, we also recorded sounds. You can hear some classic Riverina sounds like the cockatoos and the crows. And we also played a little bit with the timbre of wood, and obviously the sounds of water as well. The water is everywhere around the Riverina. It's in the rivers. There's creeks. There was beautiful rainfall. So you kind of lush sounds of water. We recorded them and then composed them into this score. And then we went into post-production and we worked with chroma key, which is basically green screen technology, which is where we got that effect. So we took footage, obviously, of me dancing in the landscapes, and then we also took footage just of the landscape, and particularly of landscape that moves, so the wind through the grasses or through the trees or the way the water lilts. And then we superimposed those in post-production onto my body. When we filmed, we painted myself in pink paint, which is a nod to our ancient ceremonial practices of painting. And I liked the pink in particular because it gave it this kind of queer bent. Though we chose the color pink more as a practical reason because it's not a color like green or blue or brown that appears in the landscape. So we were able to isolate it out in post. Once we had done a kind of a draft version of that, James came back to me and he said he could get rid of that little pink edge around. He could make it really precise, but I actually asked him to keep it in. I thought it was nice. I didn't want it to be too perfect. I didn't want it to be a kind of a Northern Territory tourism ad, you know? I thought there was something slightly cheesy or slightly kind of homemade about it that I thought was really nice. Plus, like I say, it gave it this little kind of slightly queer tint, literally, to it. So Giraru Galing Ganhagirri was co-commissioned by the Blacktown Arts Centre. I'm so thrilled that it's there, as well as by the National Gallery of Australia. It was presented first at the Triennial of Indigenous Art, curated by Hetty Perkins at the National Gallery of Australia. It's also going on tour around to some places, including, I'm very excited, going to Dubbo. So it'll actually be presented on country, which is really exciting. The work is also getting interest over in Europe. I'm going over in a couple of weeks, actually, to present the work in Berlin at the Humboldt Forum. The collaboration with the elders and the community in Wagga Wagga is also continuing. I am currently choreographer in residence at Chunky Move, which is the flagship dance company of Victoria. And through that 2-year tenure, I have spent a lot of time up in Wagga making this work, but also collaborating with the elders and the community and other artists there around a large-scale work called Garabari. Garabara actually is the Darug word, which the whitefellas turned into the word corroboree. And Garabari is the Wiradjuri word that is kind of shared with a lot of Southeast mob. So Garabari is going to be a large-scale work for 5 dancers that will invite the audience in, a little bit like Giraru Galing Ganhagirri does, to slow down and to take time to encounter and re-encounter a contemporary civic ritual that we're going to create together. That's premiering in December at Arts House in Melbourne, and then we're working towards a little tour of Wiradjuri country, hopefully in 2024. So yeah, thank you so much to Paul and all of the team at Blacktown for having me. I hope you all enjoy the work, enjoy the whole exhibition. If you would like to reach out, if you have any questions, or you'd like to say hi, or just like to follow me and what I'm doing, you can find me on Instagram at JoelBrayDance, or you can find my website, www.joelbraydance.com. We have a newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter to stay in touch with all the goings on. And until I see you IRL sometime, a big mandangu. Thank you.